monetary policy. Richard, we have a question here about the integrity of government statistics. Would you be good enough to talk about whether you feel that government statistics are subject to political pressure, and what do you use in deliberating on statistics in making federal policy?
Well, we have an awful lot of statistics in government. And by the way, going back to my answer before, we have countless statistics on agriculture and countless statistics on manufacturing. Where we don't have a good measure is the service sector. And where we really suffer from a lack of good statistics are on the impacts of globalization on the gearing of the U.S. economy and how it impacts us here at home and what's going on elsewhere. It's very hard to get a sense from the Chinese numbers as to whether they're actually accurate. Imagine collecting that kind of data over that population base. And I remember one quarter when China reported their GDP the day before the quarter ended. So you can figure that one out. They're getting better at it. The reason I mention that, Alex, is because if you think as a central banker, you cannot think in a closed economy terms. We don't live by ourselves. We share the world with others. Electronic impulses transmit financial data with the movement of a mouse and a click. We are globally integrated whether we want to be or not. It's because of what I mentioned earlier, the fall of the Soviet Union, China's new role, and what I call the two Steves. That is the fellows that invented the Apple computer. We are interlinked and inextricable. So the answer to your question is, first of all, we don't have sufficient data. Models are built on data. If you model economic behavior, you're using data. Data by its nature is historical, which means it captures the past. And the difficult thing for a policymaker is not the past, it's what we're going to do for the future, what inflationary expectations are, for example, rather than what inflation has been. The data that are mostly used are created by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I know the people work to maintain the integrity of that data. I infer from your question that people wonder whether the inflation data is correct. I will tell you that in Dallas, at the Dallas Federal Reserve, as in the Cleveland Federal Reserve, we calculate our own what's called trimmed mean measure of inflation. And what that means is we work very hard, as the whole Federal Reserve System does, and inflation measurers do, to take out the noise and pick up the signal. And when we calculate the trimmed mean at the Dallas Fed, which is different than the way everybody else in the Federal Reserve System works and guides my arguments in the policy discussions, we'll trim out the most extreme movements from month to month, according to a mathematical formula that go up or down, and focus on the underlying signal. Let me give you an example. 1 month, 2 years ago, the price of funerals went up dramatically. The price of guns went down dramatically. One could infer that there was some causality there. But I don't want to get the gun lobby upset. But the fact is, they moved to such a degree, we trimmed them out because they were way beyond the normal parameters. And in that way, we work our best effort, sorting through thousands upon thousands of price variables to come up with an accurate measure of inflation. The one thing we know now from the survey data, according to the University of Michigan, is that inflation expectations are too high. The one thing we can see at the counter at the grocery store and at the gas pump is inflationary pressures now are too high. And again, this is one of the debates we have at the table as to what the right monetary policy in response should be. But I do place faith in the accuracy of the data that we have. The question is the sufficiency of the data we have in a globalized world, and that I think we can always improve upon.
Unfortunately, we've reached the point in our program where there is only time for one more question. Richard, if you had just graduated from college, what direction would you take if you desired an interesting and dynamic life?
Wow.
2 minutes, minute and a half.
This will sound like an oddball answer. First of all, I would have studied liberal arts. I would want to read everything possible, from the Old Testament to the Quran, to good modern literature. And I will answer it in terms of what I tell people that send me their children and always then call me afterwards and say, what the hell did you tell my child? Sorry, we're on the radio. What the heck did you tell my child? I always tell them to go do aid work in Africa, or in the old days, go drive an ambulance in Bosnia. or get a backpack and just sail around the world. Because that becomes the foundation of knowledge and experience. And I always tell them not to jump right into investment banking or go to work for a law firm. And I can guarantee you, I can tell you the exact time link it is before the parent calls me very upset at what I've said. But that's my answer, Alex. I mean, look, you and I were at Harvard in the 1960s. We did not look like this. You did, but I did not. And I think the experience that we've had seeing how humans suffer and how they interconnect and how people communicate and how much poverty there is in the world and what success is and why people succeed and what systems work and what don't work. I think that's the most invaluable lesson that young people can learn, and that's what I would urge them to do and take time off to do that.
Would you encourage someone to be involved in public service?
Of course, that's the right answer I should have given. and yes, the answer, and I would encourage anybody who cares about the issues I spoke about tonight, and anybody who's fortunate enough to do well. And I'll end on this note, which is a note I started on. My parents came here with zilch. In fact, my father came with no papers and they wouldn't let him in, 1939. So he bopped back and forth across the border from Mexico. No education, nothing. His son went to all these great schools that you mentioned when you introduced me. Imagine that. So I think that's our greatest virtue as Americans, Alex. And I would encourage anybody to think that there is a need to pay back the good fortune that we've received. And I believe that's why everybody in some way, shape, or form, whether it's Ben Bernanke serving either as a school board chairman or chairman of the Federal Reserve, whatever the right appropriate level where you feel comfortable is you should pay it back, as they say, particularly if you've been blessed with good fortune. Thank you very much for letting me speak here tonight.